Hello, and welcome back to part 4 of our Dalet AmberFin workflow engine tutorial. Now that we have a good understanding of the designer and stencils, we are ready to build a complete end-to-end workflow. The scenario will be a typical transcoding QC workflow. We'll receive incoming files in both SD and HD to a watch folder, transcode them to our house format of XDCAM or IMX, perform an automated QC followed by a manual QC if required, and then move the file either to playout or to quarantine if the file does not meet our quality standards. So to get started, the first task I will add to my canvas is the watch folder task. Once on the canvas, I need to fill in the mandatory properties in the right-hand panel plus any optional properties that might enhance our workflow. For the watch folder, the most important property is the location, which I can set up using a map drive or UNC path. Then I can filter the files that will trigger the workflow. I'm going to allow MXF and MOV files. After a file triggers the workflow, we want to gather technical information about that file, so we can make conditional decisions later on. To capture that metadata, I will add the Analyze Media stencil to the canvas and connect that to the watch folder. Even though I have connected the two tasks together, I will need to configure the input to the new task. The reason for this step will become more apparent as we add more tasks to the workflow. The input to my Analyze Media task is the file dropped into the watch folder, so I'll pick watch folder and output file path from the drop-down lists. The next step in the workflow is to send the file to an XDCAM transcode if the input is HD, or send it to an IMX transcode if the input is SD. For this, I'll add an exclusive gateway and 2 transcode tasks. It's a good idea to name these tasks as you go along, so I'll rename mine now, and while I do that, I will also select the appropriate transcode profile, which I already configured in AmberFin Dark. You can also add a label to the links by clicking on them and going into the properties. To configure our SD-HD condition, I first click on one of the links and change the link type to conditional. Then click on the condition. If I click the magic wand, I get a list of workflow tasks and their outputs. We need to find out the resolution of the file from the Analyze Media task, so I'll select that task and then select the output height. Then I will select numeric, less or equal, and add a value of 608. I've chosen 608 as this will include IMX input files that have an extra 32 lines of VBI. Now that I have set this condition, I can leave the link to the HD transcode as normal. That means that if the SD condition is not met, such as the height of the incoming video is over 608 lines high, the default workflow will be directed to the HD transcode task. To find out more information about the metadata gathered by the Analyze Media task, you can click on the Information button next to the stencil. The next step of our workflow is to perform an automated QC on the new output files. I'm going to use Aurora, but you can use any of the integrated QC systems. I'm going to use 2 Aurora tasks because the QC template will be different for the 2 formats. So I'll add an Aurora task after each transcode. At this point, I'll rename both the tasks and configure the inputs. For the SD-QC task, the input will be the SD to IMX output file path. And for the HD-QC task, the input will be the HD to XDCAM output file path. Now we just need to choose the Aurora QC template that we have already configured in the Aurora interface. The next task in the workflow is to analyze the results of the automated QC and trigger a manual review if the QC result is a fail, or move the file to playout if the QC result is a pass. For this, I will drag over the Analyze QCML stencil and connect it up to the automated QC tasks. QCML is the name that we give our XML QC reports. The input to this task could be either of the previous QC tasks. Remember, the input file will go through only one of the transcode paths, depending on the input resolution. So all I need to do is add 2 inputs to the task, the output of the SD QC and the output of the HD QC, as only one will be valid. So I add the SD QC QCML output file path and the HD QC QCML output file path, just adding one after the other. Now that we have the status of the QC, we need to add a new decision point using the exclusive gateway. followed by the manual QC, and a file move. Just like before, we need to add the conditions to the links. So I'll click on the link between the exclusive gateway and the file move. Select the link type as conditional and edit the condition. This condition will be the result of the analyzed QCML. The possible outputs will be passed, warning, failed, unknown, or no QC data. Only passed would indicate a successful QC result, so I'll use that for my condition. If the analyzed QCML UQC results equaled passed, the workflow will continue to the move task. I'll leave the other condition as normal, so if the above condition is not met, the default route will be to go to manual QC. Next, we will configure the manual QC task. So I'll add the input file path, which will be either the output of the HD transcode or the output of the SD transcode. So I'll add both, just like we did earlier for the analyze QCML task. Now for the move task, I will configure the input path, which is exactly the same as the manual QC input file path, so the output of both transcodes. And I will add the location that I want to move the file to. The workflow will be complete after the move task, so I'll drag over the end event and connect that to the move task. I'm going to add one more exclusive gateway to my workflow, which will be after the manual QC. The idea here is to allow the operator performing the manual QC to either mark the file as failed or override the result of the automated QC and mark the QC status as passed. So I'll add the exclusive gateway and connect it to the manual QC. I will also connect it up to the file move and to a new file move where we'll move the file to a quarantine folder. Remember to name the task accordingly. This always helps in the long run. Now I just need to add the last condition, which in this case will be on the pass link. And the condition will be the manual QC result equals pass. Then I configure the move to quarantine task in the same way as the previous move task. The input will still be the output file path of both the SD and HD transcode tasks. And the output folder path will be, in my case, C drive quarantine. Finally, I will save my workflow so we can deploy it in the next episode. So that's it. We have made quite a complex workflow, but we can obviously do much more than this. It's a good idea to start off simple, and then when you are happy with your workflow, you can go back and add boundary events, email notifications, annotations, etc. to further enhance the functionality of the workflow. Join me in the next episode where we will deploy the workflow, monitor its status, and perform the manual QC. To find out more about our products and solutions, please visit www.dalet.com. If you find this video helpful or have suggestions for future tutorials, you can tweet us using @DaletAcademy or email us using academy@dalet.com.